Hello and welcome to the Castle Talk podcast, where we talk to writers and creators of today's genre worlds from Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming series Young Captain Nemo from Fievel and Friends Macmillan Books. Tonight, Jonathan Milott and Cary Murnion are the co-directors of the new film Bushwick, which posits a new civil war as Brittany Snow of Pitch Perfect and Dave Bautista of Guardians of the Galaxy run through Brooklyn trying to avoid the invasion of what amounts to an American army. This is really scary, really fascinating stuff. I am so excited to talk to you about this material because I've already seen this film this week. So, guys, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us. Excited to talk to you. Thank you.
I'm very excited to talk to you. So, okay, I talked about the material a little bit. It is, and just let me say that visually, this feels like a documentary along a lot of the time. You're following the camera all around behind these people as they run. It starts out in a subway with Brittany Snow, and it follows her through the city as she learns more information. So I'm going to ask you about how you put all that together, but how did you wind up coming to this material? How did this become what you wanted to work on?
It all started back in 2009 when the former governor of Texas, Rick Perry, had this kind of like offhand comment, sort of joking, sort of not, about that Texas should secede from the United States. And this was when Obama was in office, and there's this kind of undercurrent of racism in there, where we had this black president, and now things should change. And for us, there was kind of a very, kind of telling comment about what was going on in the world back then. And so it was around, I think, 2011 when we started thinking about the what ifs. What if what Rick Perry said actually happened? Because there was, I think, since 2009 to 2011, there was news stories about, even though he was kind of joking, the people in Texas kind of took it seriously, where there were sheriffs who were starting petitions about doing it. And so there's like little news stories bubbling up about this. So for us, it was kind of interesting to think of how this would transpire if it actually happened. And
what would that actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to get this ratified through the Congress and Senate to make that actually happen. And we thought, well, that's never going to happen. Like, there's not going to be any ratification of Texas seceding. So then we kind of looked at, well, okay, if they were told no, would they just stop? And we didn't think Texas would stop. We thought they would actually try to keep pushing it. And then we started so there's that side of it. And then we started to look at, well, America, when we invade other countries, we have our army, but we also hire a lot of outside forces like Blackwater, like these kind of mercenaries who kind of go in and do things. And that's what a lot of other countries do as well. A lot of like smaller countries, if they don't have their own armies, they'll hire armies to kind of represent them. So we said, okay, what if that actually happened with Texas? If they wouldn't actually get the U.S. Soldiers to do this, but they could get former soldiers as part of these mercenaries to become their army, to force this secession to happen. So, I mean, these are kind of a bunch of what ifs of like how this could transpire, but we thought, it's maybe kind of pushing it in terms of believability, but if we kind of extrapolate onto, again, what we do on the bigger stage in the world and some of how these people think and how serious they are about it, it could actually happen. So if you were going to hire your own army to force the secession to happen, we thought you would invade some of the bigger cities to, like, not actually to fight, but you kind of show your force, show you're serious, so that they could force the ratification to happen.
Which is why supposedly they choose Brooklyn, according to the exposition scene in this movie. That's why they wound up. That's why they wound up in Brooklyn, is because they had this notion that it would be a soft target, that they would land there and it would just be a bunch of Whole Foods and there wouldn't be any resistance.
Exactly. There's that, because you wouldn't go in whatever city you invaded. You do not go into the center of the city. And again, we looked at how we invaded Iraq and Baghdad. Right. You don't go. You would first go into the outer boroughs or outer parts of the city to kind of put down your stronghold of your forces and make sure you're okay. And then if you actually had to go into the center of the city, you'd have kind of place as your base. So again, we use that, the tactical part of it, that you wouldn't go right into Manhattan. You would first go into the kind of softer outer parts. And Bushwick as a neighborhood, it's huge. And there's lots of parts that aren't very populated. There's there's like vast areas where there's just kind of warehouses and not many things happening. And I think so that was kind of our chance to use Bushwick as a place where it could really be a place where you could kind of put down, have a chance to get your forces in, and then possibly invade Manhattan. So that's
This
why
is
we
so
chose
fun.
Bushwick. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds
It was
like you're looking
tactical.
at a map on the wall and sort of pushing imaginary armies around and as you're planning the story out.
We really were. I mean, we used these kind of real invasions as essentially maps for us to kind of say, like, look, if this was potentially real, this could happen. And I think we also wanted
one of the
Go ahead,
one of the main things with this explanation is that I think when people hear the premise that, and I think it comes across as that the secession is happening by invading like a Whole Foods in Bushwick, when that is not, that's not what we're saying. We're, like what we're kind of explaining now, and hopefully is clear in the movie, is that, yeah, it is a soft spot, and it is only like a small snippet. We're only following one character in one part of this invasion, whereas the invasion is happening across the United States and all focused on bigger cities. And, even though this particular army is really invading Manhattan, which you kind of see by the end, this is, like we're describing, this was only the beginning where they're surrounding Manhattan. And this just, we didn't follow the army as they were maybe in Staten Island and Hoboken and Harlem as they surround the whole city. We are only following this one person in one part of the invasion.
Well, to that extent,
they don't hate Brooklyn. Like, oh, those, let's just get those Brooklyn guys. It's more like, oh, we don't really care about Brooklyn. We can just kind of find our spots there and then go into the main area.
I was just going to suggest, and I apologize for interrupting you. I was going to suggest, it reminds me a lot. The way that we follow so closely over the shoulder of Brittany Snow, it's like a zombie movie, or like War of the Worlds, where you follow Tom Cruise. He's not a special guy. He's not he's not in any way connected. He's just a guy who wakes up one morning and there's an invasion going on around him.
Yeah, and that's definitely what we wanted to have, is someone that you could relate to as you're going, and that's why we combined. We paired the character of Lucy with the character of Stoop, who have different kind of experiences that you can kind of see the different tolls that this kind of experience takes. Another big inspiration for us was both John and I's experience during 9/11 in New York, where there was this really a kind of an invasion that happened where no one knew what was going on, and there was a lot of misinformation happening. And it all happened pretty quickly. And you do what comes naturally to you, and a lot of people would first go, no matter where their family was, whether it was close to the towers or not, they would just I'm going to go to my family to make sure that we're together. And so that was, again, like that experience of feeling this sense of that you don't quite know what's going on. I'm going to do what I can and see what happens next. And that's what we wanted to happen with Lucy. Is she's not someone who's experienced in this, of course, not at all. And so some of her decisions might not be what someone who has some tactical knowledge of things going on. And so, but that's kind of what we thought was more real about it, because it wasn't some soldier. She was just kind of a regular girl coming home to her neighborhood.
Yeah, I love that. I love how it's divided up into these set pieces where she wants to find her grandma. It's very simple. I have a grandmother in this neighborhood. I want to find my grandma. Along the way, they hit all these different sort of places. There's the subway, the street, the tower, the drugstore. One situation after another, and you keep sort of upping the tension as they move along. I'm also curious, can I ask you, because I talk to a lot of novelists, right? And that's my background, and so I do those. But when you are plotting out, and I don't know if you did the screenplay for this, but I'm wondering, all these sequences, we mentioned whiteboards earlier, are you going, it would be best if it went like street, then tower, then drugstore, then outside like, how are you plotting out how this action is going to flow so that it stays so it stays dynamic and sometimes hard and sometimes soft?
Kind of a combination of both. What I mean by both is that you do want to have, you don't want to just be on streets the whole time, because you kind of get bored. So you do purposely pick this you want to go in and out, and you want to kind of go to we felt like we want to go into a cramped place, and we want to get into a bigger place where you don't quite know what's going on. So we pick locations, kind of hopefully have a nice up and down there. But it also, honestly, depended on the neighborhood. It was a neighborhood. I lived in Bushwick in that neighborhood, for 5 or 6 years, and we wanted to feel, as authentic as possible. So 95% of the movie is shot within a real 4 or 5 block radius of, we're not cutting to different parts of Brooklyn. Like we are, when you go down the street and turn the left into a church, the church is there. So it was like, okay, we have this 4 blocks or 5 blocks. Now let's pick places in those 5 blocks that kind of have this kind of nice rhythm of something small and something big, and gives us opportunities to have Lucy experience things that we thought were real. And she is actually, her direction, when she comes out of the subway to her grandmother, she is always going towards her grandmother. Like, so all those kind of twists and turns she's trying to get there. And that's really how it happened in that neighborhood.
That's fabulous.
That was something that we've kind of plotted out, kind of character interaction wise, and even level of destruction wise, with our art department from, right from the start was, you start off with the beginning of the invasion, which is just a few people on the streets and a little bit of chaos. It's not so crazy. And then each subsequent time you're in the street, there's like an elevated level of destruction and chaos and looting, and it gets worse and worse and worse until the end. So kind of mirroring that with each subsequent kind of interaction with the characters is, finding people that she knows that are dead, how she react to that, finding people from the neighborhood, and each time, it needed to keep building and building to the point where, as her character, she had to realize that the world she was hoping she was coming home to was just non-existent anymore, and then that forces her as a character to change and make some decisions and do some things that she probably didn't know she could even do.
Absolutely.
At the beginning of the movie.
Well, one she takes just immediately when she's enraged that these guys had looted a grocery store and killed the grocer, and she this is where we should talk about Dave Bautista, because she becomes suddenly very aggressive, and he's like, what are you doing? you have to have you have to have a strategic reason for doing any of these crazy tactics that you're suddenly doing. And tell me a little bit about Dave Bautista's character.
Yeah, it was great. We wanted to have his character be someone who's been through something like this before and kind of knows the end result and is trying to avoid it at all costs. He's not this he doesn't want to get into a fight. He's trying to avoid, shooting people. He doesn't want to see people get killed anymore, even though he's done that. And he wanted to kind of give him a character that will draw him back into it, because that's hard. Because if you've been through all this, it's going to take a lot to have you go back in that situation. And it was a big point for us that when we start off, he doesn't just automatically take her under his wing and says, I'm going to save you. He actually tries to leave her at the beginning. When she asked him to go along with him, he's like, no, you go. I'm doing my own thing. Yes, you can maybe you want to follow me, but I'm going to where I'm going. You can go wherever you go. And then things along the way kind of make him realize that, look, okay, maybe I should be saving this person because she's a good person and I want to kind of help her where I couldn't have helped someone else before. And so with Dave Bautista, we kind of know him as an action star, someone who, especially as Drax, who loves, he wants to, any chance he can, he's going to get into things and start to fight. And we like the idea of subverting that a little bit of, who you think of Dave Bautista in other films and who he is in real life. He's more like Stoop. He is more kind of reserved, and he doesn't want confrontations. He is kind of he's a pacifist. He doesn't want to fight. So I think that kind of takes into account of how well he did with Stoop, where he was pulling things from himself that we haven't seen with him in some of the more other roles he has, even like Inspector, where he's like a killing machine, and in this it's kind of the opposite of that. And I think he's just fabulous in this movie of showing that internal struggle of how you deal with violence that you've done in the past and being brought back into that, and having a character like Lucy, who has a temper and will do something surprising, and he's like, God damn it, I have to do this now. And we thought that was interesting for an action guy. He's like
a huge guy that is capable of extreme violence in real life. There is a scene where he's throwing a 200-pound stuntman around, which is very difficult to do. It just takes so much physical strength and ability, and from his years of wrestling and actually doing practicing mixed martial arts and things like that. He's a physically imposing and can really he could really probably defend himself against 99% of the people in the world. So he is a really big, strong guy.
Yeah, and it's surprising though how vulnerable he can be. And there's a speech that you've given him in here that reminds me so much of the Rambo speech from First Blood.
Yeah.
I think it was First Blood.
Yeah.
And it's so much like that. Yeah, and this is. I think if people like Dave Bautista, this is a great opportunity to see him do a really surprising performance. It's really
And
it's
and
really
talking specifically to that speech you're talking about, that's actually all Dave.
Yeah.
We had his backstory, his character, and there's gonna be the scene at the end where we knew we wanted him to kind of talk with Lucy, and there was a few lines written in the script, and he came up to us and he's like, look guys, I have a story, I have kind of more of a backstory to Stoop that I would like to kind of talk about on screen. And he said, I'd love to just try it, like without even telling us. He's like, I want to just sit down and try it and see how it comes out. And so all those words in this particular scene which we're talking about is all from Dave's heart, and he used, again, a lot of his experience in his life, and it is a very touching scene. And I think we just have to kind of give him props as an actor for kind of pulling that kind of scene off, because it's very hard to kind of go through that.
It's very exciting. I watched this thing all in one setting, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I think I'm so sick, meaning no disrespect to zombie movies, but I swear to God, Bushwick plays like a zombie movie that could actually happen. You are terrified for these people, and hoping, honestly hoping that they survive. It's a very, very creative vision.
And I think that's a good analogy with a zombie movie, because we don't, as you'll see from the movie, like we don't have the one kind of bad guy that is the one that follows Lucy the whole time, that she's up against the whole time, that she has to beat. And for us, that's the more realistic thing in terms of life, where if you're trying to get from point A to point B in an experience like this, there isn't going to be that one soldier who follows you the whole time. And so, but in terms of movies, that's usually how it would play out in a more traditional action movie. There'd be the kind of lead soldier who somehow focuses on Lucy and follows her the whole time, and that's not how life is. So a zombie movie is very similar to that. Usually there's not like a head zombie. You are fighting the idea of people coming at you the whole time, and how are you going to survive? And to us, it was interesting to kind of take that, as you said, into real life and see how that could play out in something that is, instead of monsters, it's people, and people become the monsters, and then you have to kind of survive that way. And we have our experience doing Cooties, which was our first feature, which was kind of the flip on zombies, where instead of the adults, it's the kids who are zombies, and how adults would deal with kids as zombies. And with this film, it's how do you deal with basically the adults who are the monsters, and you have to kind of get through them to survive.
All right, Bushwick. It stars Brittany Snow and Dave Bautista, and it is out now. I am so thankful, Jonathan Milott and Cary Murnion. I am so thankful that you would talk to me about it, and I wish you all the best. I hope it does fabulously.
Thank you so much. This was great talking about this. I really, really appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. I'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks so much.
Bye.